Start your meditation.
Hello, fellow Amiga users. Bill here. I'm super excited. We have a great show for you today. Anthony and I were invited down to Vintage Computer Festival Southeast by our good friend Adam Spring to appear on the Viva Amiga panel. And man, it was a real honor to be invited to this event. But to tell you more about it, let's talk to our friend Adam, who I have over here. Adam, what is up, dude?
How's it going? You all right?
That's great, man. Oh, thank you so much for inviting us down to this panel. I had an absolute blast. It was so much fun, and it was really an honor to be on a panel with such distinguished guests. Why don't you tell us a little bit about like who is on the panel?
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, I guess we're going to have to start with Glenn Keller, obviously, a major player on the Paula chip, the sound chip inside of the Amiga. Then we obviously had Trevor Dickinson, who, A-EON Technologies, PowerPC, Next Gen Amiga stuff. Then we obviously had, you and Anthony, the deadly duo, the partners in crime. And then we also had Aaron Ruchetta as well, who was representing the Atlanta Amiga scene. And then, of course, we couldn't have a Viva Amiga panel without Zach, the filmmaker behind Viva Amiga. So that's who we had.
Man, it was a really, really great group of people and an awesome discussion. What motivated you to put this together?
So really this journey started probably around about in 2013 when, I was tinkering with my Amiga and I thought, well, let's write a blog post on it. And then basically I had about 10,000 hits in the space of, about 3 days. And then from there it spiraled on. I did an IEEE Annals article on the scene and things like that. And I don't know, I felt I wanted to give something back to the community, and I thought the panel was the right thing, particularly after attending, the event in California back in 2015. I started to know a lot more of the guys, not just Dave Needle, a bit better, and I thought the timing was right with Zach's film coming out. And obviously Zach and I have been talking for a long period of time as the film was being produced as well.
Yeah, like the Viva Amiga film is like the perfect, platform for this panel, but this panel is actually more not just about the film, but it's about the Amiga in general, and Paula chip and the designers and stories and the future of Amiga with Trevor Dickinson. So just the mix of people that you got together was really incredible.
Yeah, and that was the idea really, because one of the things I was thinking about is we need to record this, because it was clear at something like 2015 for the 30th that you never know who's going to be around, and the 40th. And I think a key thing about the Amiga story that's really started to come out is the stories, the individual stories. One of the things, for example, one of the reasons for having Aaron on the panel was because, I drove from Atlanta to San Francisco with him with an insane amount of Amiga stuff. And it was such a big thing in the scene here. And, not just for the audience that was there that day, but for people around the world that are interested or watching on YouTube. To be able to have that story there, we had several things I think going on at once on the panel, and I thought it was pretty awesome, and I think that weekend in general, it showed it was the right thing to do at the right time. I don't know whether you agree with me or not, but that's the way I felt. So yeah.
No, I totally agree, and as much as I love the Amiga computer, the thing that I really learned most since I got into this YouTube channel and the streaming is that it's really more about the people. I love the machine, but the people in the community that are around it are such a special group of individuals. They're smart, they're kind, they're friendly, they're extremely helpful. It's almost like a brotherhood and sisterhood just based around this machine. And the machine's awesome, but the people are what really keep me interested in the hobby.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you kind of summed it up in the panel itself when you said the Amiga was a computer with soul. And I think having met a lot of the people that helped develop it along the way, I think that's absolutely right. It's one of those rare instances where you had this family feel of a development team being spread through the technology. And I don't mean that in a hippie sense. I mean it in, it makes sense. If you meet the people and then you meet the people that adopted it and kept it going, there's definitely a sense of community there. And I think, we've said it many times, but when you meet an Amiga person, it's like you've known each other for years. And it's a weird experience, but it's kind of cool,
It really is. And on that note, I think it's time to roll the video. And rolling the video, I just want to give a big shout out to Alan Hightower and your team at Vintage Computer Festival Southeast. This is actually their
100%.
video. Yeah, they did an amazing job. Alan set
Yep.
up this incredible stage. It was completely professional and top notch. And he and his guys, he had 2 camera operators there. So this is a multi-camera shoot. And Alan put it all together. And I just want to thank those guys so much for allowing us to use their footage on our channel, and spread the Amiga word throughout the community. So if you guys have a chance, please check out Vintage Computer Festival Southeast. I'll be posting a link in the description to this video. It's a top-notch show. The guys are super, super cool, and they do incredible work. So Adam, thank you so much, and guys, enjoy the video.
So, did everyone enjoy that?
Oh, good, good. I wanted to be a crowd pleaser above all else, you know? Amiga was a fun computer. Wanted to make a fun documentary that captured the heart of the Amiga, and I definitely think I pulled it off. So.
You definitely did, you're all right.
Thanks.
Okay, so to my left and going to my right, we have Glenn Keller, and I think the film explained what Glenn did. We have Trevor Dickinson. We have Zach Weddington. We have Aaron Ruchetta. We have Bill Winters, and we have Anthony Becker. So thank you for coming. Right, so before we open this up for questions then, Zach, what inspired you to make the film?
VCF, where you are right now. I think I mentioned it before the film. Yeah, coming out to VCF, seeing the Amiga. I hadn't touched an Amiga in 10 years at least. And it just kind of reminded me how much the Amiga meant to me. And just kind of rekindled that passion, for computers that I used to have more, when I was a teenager. We talk about how, computers today maybe not so awe-inspiring, but yeah, it's all due to VCF. Mike Lee, huge help.
And as for you, Glenn, as a member of the original team, what's it like seeing something like Viva Amiga out there?
Oh, Phil. Yeah, it's kind of amazing. It's just amazing that that Zach's done this wonderful thing. It's just, I'm completely blown away.
And as for you, Trevor, as somebody that's looking to drive things for the future, how do you see the film as important?
Well, two things. One, there was a good-looking young man in the film with black hair. The film took so long to come out, Zach, that look what happened.
Very true. Yep. Long history there.
To be honest, for me, it was. I'm really pleased Zach did the film. It was a combination of all the things I like about the Amiga, and I think in the film there was a mention of it's about the community, it's about the camaraderie, and you can meet a fellow Amigan and say custom chipsets and preemptive multitasking and go yeah.
And focusing on that aspect of community. So Aaron, from an Atlanta point of view, can you tell me what was going on in the Atlanta Amiga scene back in the day?
Back in the day, yeah. From the beginning, there was a great group, user group formed through some folks at Georgia Tech called Amiga Atlanta Incorporated. And we ended up playing being a very prominent force in the Amiga history, especially when we got together and hosted the 10th anniversary of the Amiga here in Atlanta. We had a president of the club at the time, Lamar Morgan. We called him Lamar the Relentless Morgan because once he had your contact information, he would not let go. So we actually arranged for Stuart Chaffee of Computer Chronicles, if anybody remembers that long-running tech show that was on PBS for a couple of decades. He was our host for the show. We had many of the notables in there, including Dale Luck, Dave Haney, R.J. Michael, Jason Compton, what? Fred Fish, that's right, Fred Fish, right. We actually, working with my friend Bob Castro over there, one of the more important members of the group, the Amiga helped Atlanta win the 1996 Olympic Games. And then when the Olympic Games got here, I was working for AT&T at the time, and they got the contract for the Special Olympics, and all the interstitials for the Special Olympics were edited on my Amiga Toaster Flyer system.
Okay, thank you for that, Aaron. Wonderful. And now we've got a two-headed beast in the corner. We've got Anthony and Bill from the Guru Meditation.
I don't think I've ever been called a beast before, but that works.
So, tell us your Amiga stories. And of course, your involvement with Viva Amiga as well.
Well, my name is Bill Winters, and I started the Westchester Amiga User Group back in 1988 when I was 13 years old. And we still meet to this day. We've very rarely missed a month when we didn't meet. So yeah, my dad used to drive me to the meetings. Basically, we were a smaller branch of the New York City Amiga User Group called Amuse. And when the guys who were running the Westchester branch, which was like a smaller satellite version of the club, they couldn't run it anymore, our club was going to fold. And no one wanted to step up and do anything. So like, you know what, I don't want this club to die. I love coming here every month and seeing you guys. I do something with my Amiga every month. So I took over. And every month I came up with a new demo to do, then I got other people involved to do demos, and we applied to Commodore, and we became an official Commodore Amiga User Group, and the club grew to 150 members, and we would get anywhere between 50 to 100 people at a meeting, and my dad used to drive me there. And then when I had to go to college, Anthony took over for me, and we've just kept it going the whole time.
Right. The Amiga, you didn't just buy a computer. This was a talisman that got you into this group. And you're taken downstairs into this dark room, and there's these figures there. And they're milling about, and there's this kid running it, and there's this guy doing graphics, and there's this guy doing amazing sound. And you're like, it's like I've been taken into some kind of temple where there's these creative people doing amazing things. You couldn't not love this machine. And I say I became an Amiga user in '87, but I think I was one when I was born. I was just waiting for it.
And before we open it up for questions, which we're going to do in a second, what will you tell us about your involvement with Viva Amiga a little bit as well?
Well, the Amiga, as RJ mentioned at the end of the film, having the Amiga as a child definitely shaped my life and my career, because it inspired me to go into film production. Now I'm a cinematographer. I make TV commercials and documentaries. And one day I was sitting at home, love movies. I was like, I love documentaries. I wonder if anyone ever made one about the Amiga. So I just started Googling. I was like, Amiga film documentary, and boom, up pops Viva Amiga. And I was like, oh, the Kickstarter's over. I guess I missed out, on this, because I would love to help him out as a cinematographer. So I was like, you know what the heck, I'll send him an email. So I emailed Zach. I was like, hey, I see you made an Amiga film. I know you're probably finished with it by now, but if you need any help, I would love to help and be a part of it. And he's like, well, actually, I'm not quite finished with it yet.
Amiga forever.
I can relate. Yeah.
So, Anthony and I jumped in. I mean, we did very little. I mean, it's Zach's film, and the amount of time and effort he put in is just mind-boggling. We just kind of came in at the end, and we did, like, the Death of Amiga scene, which was sad.
I have to admit, no Amigas were harmed for those shots where you see they're thrown out in the abandoned mall. Those are just parts that I had, and, like, let's get some shots to really get the feeling that we felt when Commodore went out of business, and we thought this thing that we loved would just wither away and die. I think we felt like those machines, just forlorn in an empty parking lot, and it was great. I had a lot of fun doing that and supplying those.
And it's very personal for me too, because Zach needed historical photos of people using their Amigas. So a lot of the historical photos you see in the film.
Well, I've seen you twice in there. You were in the film twice.
Yes, I'm in the film twice. So a lot of the historical photos you see are from our Westchester Amiga User Group when we're kids. You can see Anthony and I in my basement playing with the Amigas. And of course, like, my favorite photo of all time, me and Jay Miner at AMI Expo in 1992 in Washington, D.C. So.
And I think just like Trevor, you had dark hair.
I had hair.
Take the hat off. Yeah.
I was 17, I think, in that photo.
Wow. Okay, so questions.
Aaron mentioned that the Amiga was instrumental in the 1996 Amiga Olympics here in Atlanta, and one of the big players in that was Toter Fay, inventor of Blue Ribbon Bakery and Bars and Pipes, which was an amazing
MIDI program, yeah.
I had that.
And so Toter and Melissa Gray went off to be with Microsoft for a while, and now they have their own company again.
All right.
Something like Blue is Back or something. But
wow. Cool.
I just thought I'd mention Toter Fay, because he was an amazing developer for the Amiga here in
all
Atlanta.
all that stuff in the early '90s was really, really cool. One of the cooler things that happened was Commodore actually had their developers conference in Atlanta in 1990, and that's where NewTek was debuting the video toaster, and so that was a very happy time to be able to participate as a club with that one.
More questions?
Just about everybody who has something near and dear to their hearts can remember that very moment that it grabbed a hold of you. How many of you remember that one moment that sold you and brought you into the Amiga fold and how that felt? And what was that moment?
Good question, actually. Very good question. Actually, I started off as a Commodore PET user. I was about 2 at the time. I think I was a bit like Bill. So I went from Commodore PET, Commodore 64, Commodore 128, Commodore 128D. You notice a trend here? Actually, I was living in Texas at the time. This is a good southern drawl from Texas. So I was living in Texas, and my Commodore 128D got destroyed in a lightning strike. So with the insurance money, I bought an Amiga 2000. And oh my goodness, I couldn't believe it. And I think it was, is it Dragon's Lair? Where it's like a video. And I thought, this is a video, this is animation on a computer. And I was really impressed with my Commodore 128, and I was running GEOS, and I was using a mouse. But this just blew me away. And I suddenly realized that this was a fantastic machine. And none of my business partners could understand this. What's multimedia? People won't want that. It's useless. Oh, it's crazy. So that was for me when I first got my Amiga 2000.
Yeah, I got a pretty good story for that one too, I guess. It's be 1988, and around that time in the mid to late 80s, you started seeing a lot of computer animation on television. I loved the music video for Dire Straits, Money for Nothing, that had those block guys. There was a Crest commercial that made these kind of like toothpaste blobs come to life in computer animation. And I asked my dad how they were doing that stuff, and he told me they did it on a computer, right? And so I was like, well, obviously I need one of those because I was already into animation, doing flip books and stuff on camcorder. So my dad went out and bought me an IBM PS2. And it didn't take very long for us to realize that I'm not going to be making any Dire Straits videos anytime soon. I was lucky to get some kind of stick figure-y, rudimentary animation on it. But, you know, I was pretty disappointed. And I guess about 4 or 5 months after we bought that PS2, I was in a Walden Books, actually, in Marietta. And in the back of the Walden Books, they were trying to sell some Amigas. And they had an Amiga 500 showing that animation you see in the film with the 2 little balls. It's called ray tracing. They were showing the juggler demo and all this stuff. And I was like, well, hey, here's a computer that looks like TV. You know what I mean? It can actually do these 3D animations. So very quickly sold that PS2. My dad thought I was crazy because he's an accountant, you know. He doesn't really appreciate computer animation. And yeah, got myself an Amiga 500 instead, and the rest is history. Thanks.
My moment was probably when my sister gifted me with Sculpt 3D as a Christmas present. And I actually got to make some 3D images and do some graphical user interface modeling. You know, that it was easily done. It was a real boon to have graphical user interface modeling, as Bob can tell you, because he modeled the entire library of UGA. The English department building, okay. He went from the architectural drawings and the earlier versions of Lightwave, of what became Lightwave. You had Videoscape, yes. You had to put all the vertices in by hand as numbers, and he took the architectural drawings and did a great animation of that. I wasn't quite prepared to go to that level, so when Sculpt 3D came along, I could actually do it as a graphic user interface and model. That was the moment. The second moment was when I discovered and really understood what AREX was and how to use it. Yeah, it was a multitasking computer, and AREX allowed you to do inter-process communications between your different programs, and most programs started coming with an AREX interface.
Bill?
Well, I had a Atari 800 and a Commodore 64, and I would always go into the store and look at the back of the box for games, and they would always have the screenshots, and I would see the Amiga screenshot and just be like, I see it on the Amiga, oh man, that's what I want the game to look like. But it was really expensive. The 1000 was expensive, couldn't afford it. And then the 500 came out, and my dad's like, this might be a possibility. So he took me to the local Commodore store in White Plains. I saw the Amiga, and we were both just blown away. My dad and I were just like, this is awesome. Like, we gotta get one of these. And the guy at the store gave us a VHS tape about the Amiga 500. Like, I went home, threw it in, and then all of a sudden it was like, I am the Commodore Amiga 500. And there was like 500s on pedestals, and there was like smoke, and they were like backlit with like blue lights, and there was like this ray trace juggler, and I was just like, oh my God, I want this so much. And I basically played that tape like every day after school from then until Christmas, and I finally got the Amiga at Christmas, and it was just like Marble Madness and Psygnosis Barbarian, just like all day, every day.
Lemmings. Lemmings was my nemesis.
Oh, Lemmings was amazing, but it wasn't out yet though when I got mine. But
And Anthony?
Right. I remember it like it was yesterday. I had a friend who had a Commodore 64 with me, and I went to college. We didn't see each other much, and when I saw him, he said, oh, I have this new computer, you gotta come see it. I go down his basement. He throws on his 1000, and his public domain games look better than anything that I have. And I'm like, these games are free, and they look better than what I'm buying in the store. Oh, there's an AMI Expo coming up, you should go. I go with him, and I see them demonstrating silver. They're drawing a circle on the screen, and they say to the person, that's not a circle, that's a sphere. And then they show this thing ray tracing, and it becomes a sphere, and I'm like, whoa, that is amazing. And being in college, of course, I'm poor, and you can't tell now, but I became very thin because of Amiga. Because my parents would give me money to buy food, and I would save it up till I could get my 500. My first program I bought for it was Turbo Silver. I bought Distant Suns. It just was absolutely amazing.
And Glenn, kind of altering that question a little bit, what's your earliest Amiga memory, and don't say I can't remember?
Well, my earliest Amiga memory is getting off the train at the Sunnyvale train station and seeing this guy with a big beard and a smile and a little dog. And we talked for a little while, and his name was Jay Glenn, and my name was Glenn Jay, and I guessed the difference between a flip-flop and a latch correctly, and I thought, I gotta work for this guy. That's mine.
Wonderful. Next question.
So this is, you've been talking about the users. I have a question for the drug dealer, Glenn. So I was kind of watching your face when the video was airing, and Bob Parasol said, this is my favorite noise, and he played it. I recalled you were responsible for Paula. Yeah, were you responsible for Paula?
Oh yeah, that was me. Yeah.
Yeah, he's responsible, guys. It's his fault. So how do you, when you see the amount of people that have enjoyed audio and you were the root cause of that, how do you feel looking back?
Well, it's kind of a weird feeling to see so many people using your work and being so enthused and wonderful about it. And it's just such a contrast to what I remember doing, which was sitting there in the lab after the first chips came back and tweaking the transistor sizes so that we would get a good 8-bit, clean 8-bit monotonic response. It's like such a contrast in ways of being. But yet, I love doing that stuff, so it's very, very cool. It's amazing how much people have done with it. I was just amazed with that.
Well, I think there were a lot of really unique aspects about the architecture, I think, and I think it's really the Amiga really kind of set the path for modern computing because of the multiple independent processors, shared memory space, multitasking operating system.
Yeah, that was all, none of that was about me, man. That was, I was the new guy, right? I didn't really understand any of that until years later.
Oh, don't be modest.
What made the Paula special for that time, though?
What's
Glenn?
that?
What made the Paula special? What differentiated it from other audio chips that were out there? You know.
Well, it had more bits. I mean, it had way more bits.
Way more
right?
bits.
Way
is
more
better.
bits.
Yeah.
Write that down.
And 4 channels. Well, it was DMA too. So 3 things. It was DMA, so you didn't have to do the sound samples one at a time with the processor. You had about a 14-bit dynamic range, which we pulled out at the last minute. And it was like 6 or 8 before. And then the other thing that there were 4 channels that you could do. So those were the 3 things.
Okay. So any other questions from the audience? There we go. We got one right there.
For folks who have not used an Amiga, like me, what would you recommend as a good place to start if you wanted to pick up an old one, a 500, a 1000, a 2000, and then going along with that, are there any like issues to watch out for if you try to find one on eBay or something? How would you, what is your advice for that?
My advice is find someone walking on the street with one, hit him on the back of the head, run with it.
So Trevor, I'll start with you.
I have a small Commodore and Amiga collection.
Just a little one.
From the Kim one through to all the next generation Amigas, including obviously the ones that A-EON make. Probably have about 200. And some of them were donated because people had them and they had them for a number of years and they didn't want to throw them away. Some were on eBay. There are a number of things to look out for. Capacitors leak and batteries leak and damage the board. But what's good about the Amiga support group is all around the world there are engineers that will repair them for you, and very inexpensive repairs. In the States, in New Zealand, where I'm from, in the UK, in France, Germany, there are a lot of repair people who are repairing Amiga motherboards, 2000s, 3000s, 4000s, 500s, 1200s.
I'm going to say Amiga 1200. I know what you're looking for. You want the one that's old architecture but still the most powerful and adaptable. It's got to be the 1200. You can get all kinds of peripherals that let you put a compact flash or an SD card on there, so you can load it to the max with all kind of software, and actually get it on the computer and not have to deal with floppies or any kind of old networking stuff. That would be my suggestion.
And if you want a next generation one, just give me a call.
Yeah,
and in addition to that as well, if you did get one of the older ones, basically there's a Vampire 2, which is for the 500 and the 600 now, that you can just drop in there and it'll immediately accelerate it and put an SD card in there as well. So if you do get the older ones, you can do that. So, Bill, Anthony, you got anything in addition to say?
For me, my main one's the 1200. Again, you can replace the hard drive with a compact flash card, but the key for me with the 1200 is it's got a PC MCIe slot in it, and then you can take a compact flash card and transfer files easily between your PC and the real Amiga. And emulation is also a great place to start because you don't have to have the hardware right there. There's amazing Amiga emulators out there. There's one called Amiga Forever. It's actually a whole package. And you can emulate every single generation of the Amiga that you want to kind of figure out which one you like. But there's also one called FSUAE, which is available for free as long as you have the ROMs from Amiga Forever. But the 1200 is just great because it's got the advanced architecture chipset. It can play something called WHD load games. I think it's the most versatile for me. 500 is also great. There's a cool expansion unit for it called the ACA 500 Plus that makes it a lot more usable.
Yeah, my favorite machine was probably the 3000. Mostly because it had a VGA output at a scan rate that didn't have the flicker problems that you have with video. The Amiga had a great deal of success because it was entirely video compatible in TSC scan rates. But when you have interlaced screens, it can be a flickering issue to look at in high resolution. And so it's one of the reasons I think that it didn't make it real big in the business world.
Yeah. So, but overall, the 1200 would be your best bet to start with. But if you did go down this route, you could. Right, so next question. Oh yeah, Glenn, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I'm prejudiced towards the first one, of course.
I actually am too. The 1000's my favorite.
Yeah.
Next question?
I have a question. So, any of you have any specific interest at the time in the kind of competitive demo scene, especially the European festivals? And was there any visibility inside of the Amiga company as to what was going on in that kind of scene?
Yeah. The demo scene was pretty amazing. One of our members, Joe Torrey, was real fond of digging up demos from the Euro scene for the Amiga. And these were amazing little programs. They might be 10 or 20K, but they'd play 15 or 20 minutes of music and animations on the screen of the Amiga playing back. They were hard-coded. You pretty much had to boot to them most of the time, but they were great psychedelic visual demos, sound and visuals. And we were treated to a lot of those at Amiga Atlanta, for sure. What was, okay, well, that and the feeding frenzies that go along with that, a lot of those came out on Fred Fish discs, and it was a collection of free and public domain software that would show up every month that were compiled by a great Unix guy named Fred Fish, and they ended up with over 1,000 discs full of
Aaron, I think Trevor's got something he wants to say.
Aaron, is it fair to say that a lot of those demo scenes came out from the Cracktro intros? And so
I think so, yeah. That's exactly where they came from.
When they cracked the games, it wasn't me, I couldn't crack games. When they cracked the games, they wanted to put their signature on the game, and so the intros became even more intricate than the games themselves.
Yeah, we have a mini doc. That was actually supposed to be covered in Viva Amiga, and we have footage for it. There was just, I wanted Viva Amiga to be the right length, and I feel like the demo scene actually could make its own little mini doc. So that's something we have in the works. Keep your eyes on AmigaFilm.com, and yeah, we're going to unleash a little documentary all about that demo scene. Explains exactly what it was. One of the coolest things. What? Demo footage of that, yeah. Actually, we were considering making a animation that plays only on the Amiga, and with some video clips in it. Thought it'd be a cool thing. We'll see.
Any other questions from the audience?
I think this is kind of mainly for Glenn. So when the demo scene kind of started developing into the early 90s and the PC scene kind of came around, the 4-channel limitations of the Amiga audio really became evident, because you started to see Gus and Sound Blaster and Scream Tracker and Fast Tracker. Was there any thought as to maybe 4 channels isn't enough at the time? And
when I was at Commodore, we worked on stuff with more channels and more bits, but that never came to fruition. It was too late.
And leading into that, could you tell us more about the AAA set and what you did with the AAA chipset?
Sorry?
The AAA chipset. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. After Amiga shut down, we turned out the lights one day. Commodore and the engineers there were still working on improvements. And one of the things was an advanced chipset, sort of a next generation chipset. And a guy named Jim Redfield head up that effort, and I worked as a contractor for him on that, and worked on all 3 of the new generation of chips. It's not very new anymore, and I've forgotten most of what it was, but I do remember we knew at that point that you had to have at least 16-bit audio, just plus modulation. So I remember looking at the layout that one of the Commodore guys had done for that, and it was the most beautiful thing. I'm thinking, man, these guys really know what they're doing. It was just so great. But anyway, so we had more channels and more modulation and just the higher quality that you needed in sound 5 or 6 years on, I think it was. Probably around 91, I was working on that stuff. But, and all of the other stuff was improved too. The blitter stuff, the video modes were better, the speeds and clock speeds, of course, could all be better with the newer technology. But that didn't ever quite make it out there. I know there was a prototype built, and some of the pieces were tested and some of them weren't, but I don't know what happened that much, because the whole thing fell apart right around then.
And Zach, what was the biggest lesson that you learned from making the film?
Get more money and get more employees helping you out before you get too serious. Yeah, like we've kind of hinted at it. Viva Amiga took me quite a while to finish, to say the least. And I didn't know what I was getting into when I started to film, and I had a real high bar for quality that I wanted the film to meet. And I think, yeah, next time around, get some more people who are dedicated and nearby that could help me just surf through so much footage to construct a story. And yeah, more startup funds, more people, you know, on board helping out to get it out faster. Other than that, no, I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna make another one. So.
And how did the Amiga community actually help you in the production of the film?
It was amazing. Yeah, like, you know, quickly on, people like Bill, you know, found out about the film and they would reach out and offer support. People like Trevor offer support, and you know, most of the people that worked on it were Amigans. Got Marvin Drogsman there, and a few other guys that actually, you know, did things like 3D modeling for me. So those, you know, those renders you see, those were all created by Amiga users. And of course, yeah, many of the Kickstarter backers, of course, were Amiga users. So they, you know, they got me going. Again, just want to say thanks to the Kickstarter backers for your patience and support. It turned out to all be worth it.
So, as Trevor mentioned briefly a little moment ago, he's actually started funding his own next generation Amigas. And as a super fan, I think it's fair to call you a super fan, actually, Trevor. What was it like for you to finally see the film? What was your initial reaction when you first watched it?
I was in tears. It sounds stupid, but I was in tears. For anyone that was at the Amiga 30th anniversary at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California, Zach screened for the first time we saw the film in front of a live audience of about 300 people.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Of which about a third were the Commodore and Amiga team. All the developers were there, their wives, their families, you know, the people that ran the stores, the secretaries, the tech people, the engineers. And I sat at a table with about 10 or 11 former Amiga Inc. High Toro employees, the marketing guy, and when it finished, they were all crying. And I really felt like I'd gate crashed their party, you know, their celebration.
We were both on the same table, so I can fully...
Yeah,
we were both
it
on
was
the same
really
table.
emotional. And I thought, Zach, you've made a film that's emotional. It should be uplifting. But even now, I watch it and I don't want it to fail. You know, I don't want it. I keep wanting it to go on. So it's a bit like one of those things. So I'm looking for the next version. And
oh, thank you.
Thanks.
And I guess sort of like really this applies not just to me, but like you, and you, of course. How does it feel, and I'm going to direct it to Anthony and Bill first, to now be able to mingle with the people that actually created this thing that had such an impact on your life? Because I find it incredibly surreal.
It's amazing.
Tell the Greg Berlin story.
Oh, it's amazing. You know, there's a song about a fiddle and how it doesn't make very good noise until it's touched by the maker's hand, and then it makes this beautiful noise. And this is a computer that you feel is touched by the people who made it. And, you know, I was showing at VCF East 4000 that wasn't working, and Greg Berlin, the guy who designed the machine, who happened to be there, walks in. First, of course, I said something bad about a capacitor in the audio circuit, and he the first words out of his mouth, I think, were something like, "Who's bad-mouthing my design?" And he's a huge guy. And then you see this person, he's walking over to the machine, he's looking over this thing that he created, he's looking for his initials in it. You never think this would ever happen. Like, you wouldn't see the person who made this thing, and he's trying to fix it, and this is my 4000, and he's pressing down on the motherboard with it turned on, and I'm going, and anybody else, I'd be like, get away from my 4000, what's wrong with you? And then I'm like, wait a second, this is the guy who made it. I think he might know what he's doing. I never expected to meet half of these people, and all of them, I think it's testament to the amazing environment that they were all in, that they are such friendly people, they're such open people, and, you know, that must have been an absolutely amazing place to work.
Bill?
The Amiga is really unique. I mean, it's a computer that has a soul. I mean, it has these custom chips in it, like Paula, Denise, Agnes, and it really adds a touch of humanity to the machine, you know. And I think the spirit of the people who designed it and who made it, it really carried into the people who were attracted to the machine, because the Amiga community is absolutely amazing. Like, I'm just so lucky to be a part of such a great group of people. It's been an amazing journey, and like everyone who I've met through the user group, through the YouTube channel, I just keep making like new friends every day, and I know they're going to be friends for life. Everyone just helps each other out. Everyone's so friendly, so supportive. It's really like, I'm just like honored to be part of this community.
And Aaron, the guy that made the complaint, is gone, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes instead of 2 to answer. So
okay. Well, no. I mean, very good point. I mean, there was definitely a community spirit about the machine, upside down, inside out, and over and under. It was great to be able to travel to Amiga shows and meet the people who were writing the software and meet the fellow Amiga users, always exchanging information. As I said, I felt community educated, so it was great to delve into that community. And that family spirit, that community spirit of it, you turn open the lid of an Amiga 1000, and all of the names of the original Amiga team are molded into the lid, including the paw print of Mitchie, which is Jay Miner's dog. And interviewing Jay Miner at the 10th anniversary, you know, it was like, you know, getting to hear the story interviewing R.J. Michael and hearing stories about Jay Miner and his dog during the creation days, and how Jay Miner would go, let's see, you draw a chip circuit, and he'd look at Mitchie, and Mitchie'd go, so he'd fix the circuit, and then
That's
Mitchie
the legend.
So that was the story of the creation, you know. And Jay Miner was probably the most instrumental in doing the chipsets and really making that whole architecture work.
So Zach, in the film, you had a party around RJ's house. So what was that like before we get on to Trevor's experience?
During the shooting?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
In terms of meeting these people that actually developed the stuff,
yeah,
you had a very intimate relationship.
It was wild, yeah. Like R.J. Michael, yeah, you know, director of software original Amiga team, just caught wind of the film at some point and had heard that people were already in it. I can't remember if we'd shot you, Glenn, yet or not, but yeah, R.J. caught wind of it and got, you know, people like Dave Needle and some of the other people in that film from the original team to show up to his house. We actually shot in his living room, and then he threw a big dinner party for us afterwards with these fancy portobello mushroom cheese things. It was pretty
very nice, very nice indeed.
Pretty fun. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it was definitely meeting the legends in person, and you know, they're as eccentric and passionate as they ever were.
Trevor.
Well, I have a few memories, but it's interesting that the Viva Amiga documentary brought together the team. It also brought together, I think, it helped with the Amiga 30th.
Yeah,
which,
absolutely.
You know, and it's quite telling that the Amiga had a 30th anniversary, organized by enthusiasts, run at the Computer History Museum in California, with all the original, you know, the ones that are alive, because obviously, unfortunately, some have passed away, but all of the original developers turning up. And I don't think I can say that about the Mac or the Apple. I don't think I can say about PC. So that's to me, that's something about the Amiga and the community. But what really stands out for me is actually, after meeting all the people from the original development team, what such a family they are, really.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We've had the privilege, you and I, of drinking into the, I'm going to say early hours of the morning, but drinking through the drinking through the night and just chatting.
It was definitely 5 a.m. by the time we finished.
With RJ and a few of the other.
And Glenn.
Glenn was there.
And Glenn, yeah.
And we helped move furniture the next day. Anyway, so you actually become part of that story.
Yeah, you do. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you're sharing part of the story, and you hope to carry on with the legacy.
Yeah. And it's kind of surreal as well, because when I was staying around, so Dave Needle, who was one of the system architects for the Amiga, I was staying around his house for the Amiga 30th, and you kind of forget what they've done, and it's just Dave. And you're walking around the house, and he's sort of pointing in the corner and saying, oh, so that's where the 3DO prototype was. And then you go in his office, and basically there's a series of patterns across the wall, and you've got one angled like that, because that was the flip pattern for the Atari Lynx. So there's little things like that you just sort of, you know, is incredible. So, Glenn, can you tell me who employee number 0 was for Amiga, for the Amiga Corp?
Oh, I think that was Mitchie.
It was indeed, yeah.
Yeah, Mitchie the dog, there you go.
That would be Mitchie.
Okay, so do we have any other questions? Oh, we do, good. Livened you up, that's all good. That's exactly what I want.
I have a question and a quick comment. I was at Amiga 30, and whoever said you should never meet your heroes is an idiot.
Yep,
Because
agree.
these guys, it wasn't just we were there with giants and just people at the same time, and it was amazing. And Glenn, I want to say thank you. And I want to ask you, the Amiga has turned up in all sorts of places. Preview Channel, NASA, Babylon 5, various video productions, so on and so forth. And I'm sure you're familiar with most of, if not all of them. Are there any that just struck you and you just kind of smiled and said to yourself, you know, they're using our computer. We did that.
There aren't any that really stand out. I'm just amazed. Whenever I see something and I find out it's been done, you know, with somebody with an Amiga, I'm just amazed and honored. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah, maybe the legacy is that diversity of applications, the way people have applied it in so many different ways, and utilized it to find their creative outlet. You know.
So does anyone have any other questions? No?
I actually have a question for Glenn. Did you ever expect when you designed Paula for that design to be so, I guess it was kind of so advanced that it was used for so long and it was still ahead for most of the Amiga's lifetime?
Oh, no. No, I didn't think it would last nearly this long. Right? Not at all.
Okay, and I guess a good question to wrap up on would be, you know, being at the VCF Southeast, and I guess it's your first retro show, full stop. What, as a creator of one of these things, what do you think of everybody still using this technology from a different age, should we say?
Well, I certainly would have expected it, and in many ways I'm surprised, because a lot of the stuff is way out of date, right? I mean, clearly you can do stuff with a lot better resolution, but I'm trying to understand what is the, like looking at like the Amiga OS, 5 that you guys are doing, it's like I'm trying to understand what it is that you're trying to recreate. And I have a sense of it, but not a very deep understanding.
We're all mad.
Oh, that's it. That's the reason.
Okay, so unless any other questions, speak now or forever hold your peace. No? Okay. Then we're done. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Amiga forever!